Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe the facility you manage could establish new revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Cart King International can be the answer to your needs. Cart King is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile coffee, food, and retail carts and kiosks. Cart King has been working with clients and corporations across North America for 20 years, providing innovative designs, custom manufacturing, and timely delivery. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on our website. Please visit us today at www.cart-king.com or just call us at 1-877-986-7771 and get your sales rolling.
PureSoapFlakes.com, 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with Pure Soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. Order today at PureSoapFlakes.com, greenhome.com, amazon.com, or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild.
Tina Helmuth is writing an ongoing series of fact-fiction books that boldly takes on today's most heinous crimes, the abduction, sexual trafficking, and cannibalization of our children. Suffer the Little Children, The Wrath of the Father, and Unbreakable. Deeply researched and mixed with the supernatural, good versus evil makes these thrillers hard to put down, shining a light on the root cause of these crimes and introducing a spiritual solution. Justice will be served. Available at lulu.com in paperback or ebook.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. I'm the president of Opperman Investigations, Digital Forensic Consulting. You can get a hold of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator, at emailrevealer.com. Also, too, if you like this show, check out our member section at OppermanReport.com, where we have all kind of exclusive shows, exclusive documents, content, special interviews that you won't find anywhere on the internet. But if you want to check out our archives, we have free archives you can find at Spreaker.com. My guest today is calling in from Denmark. His name is Stefan Ho, and it's spelled Steffen, and his last name is spelled Hou. So you can find him at steffanho.com. He's got a couple of books. One is called Moms of the Missing, Living the Nightmare, and a previous one is The Deprived, Innocent on Death Row. And we were just talking off the air, and he was telling me that the burden on his heart is to be the voice for the voiceless, which is very impressive to me. Mr. Ho, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you for having me on the show today, Ed.
No, thank you so much. So tell us about yourself. Who is Stefan Ho?
I would say he's a young man, despite the fact that I just turned 44 the other day, but who started out as a reporter almost 20 years ago. I was educated from the National School of Journalism in Denmark and worked at the largest daily newspaper in Denmark for a number of years, mainly covering topics such as crime and also some political-related topics. And quite early in my career, I decided to start out as an independent contractor with newspapers in Denmark. They would, on outsourcing basis, commissioned my company to do different topics. So when people, they sat with the morning paper, they would think that it was the newspaper who had actually produced the content, but it was my company who did it. And slowly I drifted away from being a reporter, a journalist, to becoming more and more a businessman. And I must admit, after having had hundreds of employees over the years, I suddenly felt very in a work-wise manner. I felt very empty in the way that I didn't set out to become a businessman. I set out to tell stories as a reporter. And therefore, I completely made a change a few years ago. I started writing books, first to be published in Denmark, but all my work was focusing on America. I've been traveling around in America since 1993, actually. So with more than 25 years of traveling in America under the belt, it has been so natural for me to look into the American society more and more. And today I spend at least a few months every year in America. And it has given me a great network in America, but also every time I travel to America, I get all sorts of ideas. And the first idea that I really set out to investigate thoroughly was something that is completely unknown. At least I can't pinpoint any of these cases of wrongful convictions in Denmark. And when I met a man in 2015 in Los Angeles who had spent more than 2 decades on death row in America for a crime he was later exonerated of, I was so surprised that this actually happened in a modern Western world, Western country, and therefore I decided to do the book, The Deprived Innocent on Death Row, which looks into wrongful convictions and doing so by interviewing 10 Americans who've all been affected by the death penalty and wrongful convictions. And latest, I've also, because during that book, I interviewed a lady who told me a horrible, horrible, horrible story about her 7-year-old daughter that was abducted in the middle of the night when she went camping with her family. At 4 a.m. in the morning, her older sister woke up this mother, Marietta. She came running to tell that she couldn't find her little sister. And when the mother came to the tent where the kids were sleeping, she could see that there had been sliced a hole in the tent. And her daughter Susie, she was not to be seen anywhere. And they actually found her teddy bear a few feet away from the tent. And that moment she knew that a crime had been committed. When I interviewed her about this story, I did it because, to my surprise, she had found the strength to forgive the guy who actually was later found guilty, or at least to confess to having abducted and unfortunately also killed this 7-year-old child. She forgave him. And the only reason why she confessed to having killed a total of 4 kids in Montana was because, as a mother, she made sure that he would not be sentenced to death. And with this assurance, he confessed to these 4 horrible murders of kids. But having interviewed her and written her story for The Deprived also made me curious about doing an entire book about abduction cases in America. And there's a certain reason, a very personal reason for me to have written Moms of the Missing, Living the Nightmare which comes out here in October. When I was working as a reporter before setting out as a businessman, I covered two cases. A case was a 10-year-old girl who was grabbed broad daylight from a beach while her mom was out swimming. Not that far away from her kid, but before she realized what had happened to mom, her 10-year-old daughter was gone. And later, she was found in some woods nearby. She had been raped and she'd been choked. And authorities would later believe that the only reason why the perpetrator left her in the bushes was because he actually thought that she was dead. I covered that horrible crime for the newspaper. And half a year later, I also covered another crime of a young lady, a teenage girl at the age of 15 who had also been abducted and held captive in a house for 3 or 4 days before she was, thank God, released. And I went to both of these crime scenes. And after the perpetrator of the abduction of the 15-year-old girl had been arrested, I went to the house where he had held her captive. And I looked in through the windows, and it just struck me how alone and scared this 15-year-old girl must have felt. And I also thought back about the 10-year-old girl, and I've had this, horrible feeling on their behalf, but also as a human being. What is it like being taken against your free will, especially as a child? And I knew a bit more about this a year later, because in 2001, I went to the capital of Serbia, Belgrade, to look into human trafficking. And I found the area where human traffickers were forcing to having their customers, so to speak, doing hard labor before they were trafficked further into Europe. And I went there to look up some of these victims, as I would call them, because many of them were also held there against their will. And all of a sudden, I was taken in a chokehold, and I had a gun pressed against my timber, and I was taking myself out of this mall where I was interviewing these mainly Chinese immigrants. And I was taken away by human traffickers. And as they dragged me away with the intention of scaring me to give up all my inquiries into human trafficking, I immediately had this feeling of being very alone and this dead fear. My experiences are by no means similar to the much more horrible crimes committed against both children and also adults being held captive for days, months, years, and in worst case scenario, even decades. But it doesn't matter if you're being forced against your will for 10 minutes, 10 days, or 10 years. You immediately have this death there, and you feel very, very alone. And that even made me, it even made me feel that I had to look much more in to this important topic of missing children and missing adults in America. And as I said, the result of it is the book Moms of the Missing,
Stefan,
soon to be released.
Let me ask you this. How were you able to escape from these human traffickers?
For these, I lost track of time as it happened. I don't remember if it was 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or 20 minutes that I was, having this gun stuck to my face while they told me that it could be very dangerous looking into human trafficking. But, as they had scared a certain thing out of me, they just left. And afterwards, I met up with a colleague that I was working on these stories with, and we went directly back to our hotel. We first informed the Danish embassy in Serbia, and they told us, to leave the country right away. And beforehand, we also went and reported the crimes with the local law enforcement in Serbia. But I felt at that time that I was working on something that was way too important for me to be scared off and pack the bags and head back home. So we actually carried on for a period of time afterwards, and we went to Bosnia, where we also looked up both human traffickers and victims being trafficked into Europe. So I didn't take the advice of both the police and the embassy in Serbia. I carried on, and it was a tough experience.
I could imagine. Now, you mentioned earlier that your first book was about innocent men on death row, innocent men and women, I suppose. Now, do you have the death penalty over there in Denmark?
No, we don't. And it's a strange thing, or a fact that often surprises Americans. Because when Americans, they ask me what it's like in Europe with the death penalty, I have to tell that there's no country in Europe that still has the death penalty. Most of the countries abolished the death penalty right after World War II. And if you compare the use of capital punishment in America to other countries, you would actually have to compare with countries such as North Korea, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq. America is the only Western country to still use the death penalty.
We have the most incarcerated, too, the highest percentage of civilians incarcerated or caught up in the penal system, either probation, parole, some kind of court-ordered supervision, in jail or in prison, and anywhere on the whole planet. And we're number one, as we like to say at the Olympics. Yeah. We're number one. Yeah. Now, what about coming again from Denmark? The number of child abductions that we see here in the United States, child killings, child abductions, how does that compare to Denmark and Europe?
Thank God they are so rare. In America, if you just look in to how many children that are reported to law enforcement in America every year, it's almost 500,000. If you look at the numbers, the total numbers of people who go missing, who are reported missing in Denmark, it's 1,100. Naturally, we're a much more smaller country than America. The size of the country to America, thank God, this is a much minor problem in Denmark than it is in America. And I think for different reasons. I have to say first and foremost that I hugely admire America and Americans. They are great friends to all European countries and definitely our closest ally. We have so much things in common, values and the way that we live life, and it's such a great thing. But there are just some things that's uneven when you compare European countries to America when it comes to crime. Crimes are much more frequent in America. Killings are much more frequent in America. And in this case, as we're talking about now, abductions, regardless if it's kids or if we're talking about adults, it's almost also much more common in America. But the good thing, with that being said, is that 99% roughly of all people being taken against their own will in America, thank God they come home safely again. They are recovered. That doesn't mean that the victims are not suffering, because if you have been abducted and recovered, it still doesn't leave your mind, and it affects probably the rest of your life. But the good thing is that most of the victims are recovered and found alive.
Now, why do you think it is, though? You're from an outsider perspective looking in. What is it about the American culture that causes so much of this crime and murders and abductions?
There are different reasons for the different topics that you're mentioning there. I would say, and it's almost lethal mentioning in America, but with the number of killings, I have no doubt that has also something to do with the number of guns in America. So much more people are being killed from gun violence in America than any other country in the world, unless if it's a country that is undergoing a civil war,
right,
or such. I believe that the only country in the world that has more guns per person than America, that would be Yemen. And if you have easy access to, guns, then it's also, in my opinion, and I think there's a lot of statistics to back that, it is also more likely that you end up, either as a perpetrator using that gun, or as a victim having, in a worst case scenario, a fatal outcome of meeting a person with a gun. So I think that with these killings, it's, people, they always say, people in favor of guns, they always say, but if the perpetrator does not use the gun, he would use a knife, a rock, a fist. But the likeliness of being killed by a gun than a fist is just much more, certain.
Sure.
So I think that is one of the reasons. But there's also another huge difference, I would say, between my experiences in America and in Europe. America is a huge country, and we're only 6 million people in Denmark. That means that we more or less all feel as we are neighbors.
Right, you all know each other, yeah.
You know what it is like with neighbors? You look after each other.
Right.
And if you do not behave in the streets of Copenhagen, it is very likely that some way or another you'll actually know someone, or someone will know you in a town not far away, because we're such a small country. The links between people are very tight in a small community. So I think that, with perhaps 20 million people living in New York City, you tend to easily become just a number in the crowd. And you're not a neighbor, you're a number. So people, they might not be, as keen on looking after you as they would be in a much smaller community. So I think that's another reason for why crimes do occur much more frequently. And then again, if you are a nation with already a very high crime rate, it escalates. You have one brick and you just put another one on top.
Yeah, I was just talking to another guest. We were talking about police shootings of unarmed civilians. And we were saying, in America here, every solution, the solution to every problem we have, a car accident, a mentally disturbed person, everything is to call the police, is our first response, call the police. Whereas in the old days, we had elders in the community. There were elders in the village that you would go to if you had a dispute with your neighbor, a dispute with your landlord. You would turn to the elders, the parish priest perhaps, and that's all gone. Do you have that over there?
That you go to the elderly?
Yeah, like you would go to a prominent person in the community to settle your disputes, rather than immediately turning to the police over here.
Yeah, we wouldn't turn to the police.
Yeah,
we would turn, to our neighbor.
Yeah, see?
Or we would reach out to, if we're talking about a mentally disturbed person, then you only call the police if this person represents an immediate threat to others. Otherwise, you would call, social services, or you would actually call, healthcare service.
Yeah.
And I think that now, touching base on that, another reason why we have much lower crime rates in most European countries compared to America also has something to do with the fact that not long ago we actually had a political discussion in Denmark, whether it was fair to say that we have poor people living below the poverty line in Denmark or not. Some politicians meant that, no, there are no one living below the poverty line in Denmark, while others would say, yeah, we still have a few, and we need to do something about it. But we do not pay for going to the doctors. We do not pay for education. We have, compared to America, more or less no poverty. We have more or less no homelessness. With that said, yes, we do have homeless people. And we naturally have people who live, from day to day, but they are all, by the end of the day, looked after. You're guaranteed social benefits. You're guaranteed free medical care. You're guaranteed access to free education. So if you really don't have to commit crimes to eat, if you don't have to commit crimes to perhaps put your kids through education or to pay your medical bills, then the reason for committing crime and choosing a path of life that I'm sure that no one really wants by the end of the day, these, reasons for doing that, they are so much smaller than they would be in a country with 50 million people living below the poverty line, because, it is undeniable that poverty and crimes, they also go hand in hand. So I think that's another explanation. But regarding your question, we wouldn't go to the oldest woman or man in the village, and we wouldn't call cops as the first response. I think that we would actually talk to each other, and we would call social service because it wouldn't cost us a dime. We would call healthcare because it wouldn't cost us or the person that we call healthcare on behalf of a dime. So, we only call cops if there's an immediate danger or if it is a police matter. So that's another difference.
We're going to have to take a commercial break. We're with Stephen Ho, and we've written a couple of books here. One is The Deprived, Innocent on Death Row, and the other one is Moms of the Missing, Living the Nightmare. And his website is stephenho.com. That's STEFFENHOU.com. I want to ask you when we come back, the situation, the motivation here in the States for these abductions, these child abductions, is it usually a sexual motivation for either sexual trafficking or rape? Is that usually the motivation, or what have you found? We'll be right back with more of Stephen Ho after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors. Hey, check out our brand new sponsor, Dynamic Solutions 2. That's the number 2. They offer a life-changing, dynamic financial solution. The finest in fast, professional, affordable credit repair. Is your credit in bad shape? Do you need a new car? Ready to buy a new house? You want to rent an apartment? Are you going to apply for a job? Any one of these activities, they're going to ask for a credit report and then check out your credit score. Let Dynamic Solutions 2 erase your negative credit remarks. They have affordable monthly prices. They accept Visa, MasterCard, PayPal options available. You go to www.dynamicsolutions, that's the number 2.com, or call 424-888-2820. 424-888-2820. Now, if you enter promo code ED or you mention Ed Opperman, you get a 10% discount. How's that? You get a free consultation, all negative items removed, get back in positive credit position. Dynamic Solutions 2, life-changing dynamic financial solutions. 424-888-2820. Tell them Ed Opperman sent you. You get a 10% discount.
Tina Helmuth is writing an ongoing series of fact-fiction books that boldly takes on today's most heinous crimes: the abduction, sexual trafficking, and cannibalization of our children. Suffer the Little Children, The Wrath of the Father, and Unbreakable. Deeply researched and mixed with the supernatural, good versus evil makes these thrillers hard to put down, shining a light on the root cause of these crimes and introducing a spiritual solution. Justice will be served. Available at lulu.com in paperback or ebook.
Are you ready to change your life, but don't know how to start? Is your stress and worries keeping you awake at night? Have you been battling grief, anxiety, or depression all alone? Have you lost touch with your own sense of being or spirituality? Soul Free Therapies offers professional and affordable live video streaming counseling and coaching services from the comfort of your own home. Sessions offered in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to our website at www.soul-free.com and book your first session today.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. We're here joined from Denmark, Stephen Ho, who's written a couple of books, The Deprived, Innocent on Death Row. We were talking about that. And then also Moms of the Missing. Now, Stephen, everyone loves to say that the most horrific crime you could commit would be a crime against a child. And everyone you'd walk to and pass by on the street would agree with you. But then here in America, in our churches, we rape our children. The Boy Scouts, we rape our children. Parents torture and murder their own children. And in these stranger abductions, like you said, 500,000 a year. What is this? Why? How can this be?
Unfortunately, it's not only in America that that kids have been raped in churches and so on. It has also been a problem in a lot of European countries. But when we're speaking of other charges committed against children, you're right. There can be nothing much more horrible than, as an example, a stranger abduction, where a child is most likely to be taken by a pedophile and raped. And with these stranger abductions, we also find the type of abduction that is most likely to have a fatal outcome. But if we look at some of these stranger abductions, where a child is grabbed in the street and taken somewhere, held captive, being raped, and in a worst case scenario, being killed, it happens so rarely, also in America. But again, these cases are also most likely to have a fatal outcome, and that is why we often hear about them in news media. But the problem of stranger abduction is actually much smaller, I would say, than what most people will probably believe from the attention that these cases attract from the media. In America, there would be, naturally it varies from year to year, but you would actually only have roughly 120 stranger abductions where the child does not know the perpetrator some way or another. But the kind of classic case where you actually have a car driving by, a child is grabbed, taken away, and unfortunately way too often being killed. But these are also the cases, as I said, that we know from news media. What is much more likely to happen to a child within these cases of abductions? That would be kids taken by someone familiar to the child. And a lot of people say, oh, how terrible can that actually be if a child is being abducted by a mother, a father, a cousin, or a neighbor living down the street with some kind of relation to the family. But these cases are not fatal in the same way, but they do horrible damage to the child as well. Almost 200,000 American kids are every year becoming the victim of family abductions, where they're forced to live with their identity hidden, where they can't go to school because they're not supposed to be in the neighborhood where they're suddenly forced to live. They don't see daylight because the perpetrator, whether it's being a mom or cousin or whoever, they keep them in hiding not to be discovered. They don't get sufficient medical care because if you are abducted, how are you actually going to get medical care? And we even have cases where boys are being dressed and treated as girls because the perpetrator thinks that the likeliness of them being discovered is then smaller. Imagine what that does to a child. And imagine what it does to a child being taken from a mother or a father, and despite the fact that they might be taken by another parent. And that does huge damage to them as well. And that type of abduction represents a very, very big problem in America. And another kind of abduction, which is really scary, and we're seeing it growing, and we're seeing this problem turning into probably the most rewarding type of crimes to criminal organization today. That is, as we started out talking about, kids becoming the victim of human trafficking. You can only sell drugs once. Often you can also sell a gun one time. But a human being you can sell again and again. And this type of crimes and the abduction cases related to it has been steadily growing over the last few decades. But it is not till now that many people actually become familiar with the fact that you don't see today only immigrants being forced into human trafficking. You also see both kids and adults being taken off the streets in America and forced into human trafficking, to exploitation where they are often being forced to either prostitute themselves by human traffickers, or they are forced to do kinds of labor that no one wished to do, and therefore you actually have to force people to do it. And that's a growing problem that is by both the United Nations and FBI and law enforcement all over the world, because there's no country in this world that is not affected by human trafficking one way or another. So, and therefore, authorities view this as perhaps already today the most rewarding type of crimes to criminal organization. It's believed that worldwide criminal organizations, they make roughly around $150 billion solemnly from human trafficking. And now it's spreading even to the streets of small American towns. And in the book, Moms of the Deprived, Moms of the Missing Live in the Nightmare, I investigate 2 abduction cases where the victims are believed today being forced into prostitution, and both of the cases or both of the abductions appeared roughly 10 years ago. One of them was a 21-year-old lady who had been out with friends, as a lot of 21-year-olds, they do on a Saturday night. She just never made it home. For 10 years, she's been gone from a small town in Missouri. And law enforcement believe that she's forced into to prostitution in Peoria in Illinois, and has been forced into prostitution for 10 years. Another case is from Spring, Texas, where it was a 16-year-old girl who got off the school bus. After she got off the school bus, no one has seen her almost for 10 years, which means she's turning 26 today. There has been several tips of her being seen at brothels in Ohio. So it means that she's believed to have been forced from Texas to Ohio, where she today is perhaps forced into prostitution. And the next question will probably be, how come that if these girls and other, both boys and girls, men and women, they walk the streets of New York, the streets of Los Angeles, the streets of Miami and so on, how come they don't just run away and head back home to the parents? The question or the answer to that is that there's a certain way that these type of abducted missing persons are being treated. First, they are often being beaten. They are often being raped as one of the first things, to be broken down. And then what happens is, and which keeps them so close attached to their abductors that they don't run away, even, spending time alone in brothels or on the street. That is that right away they're also being given drugs against their will. But if you're being injected with heroin again and again and again for weeks, you suddenly become addicted. And to many of these victims, this addiction is much stronger than their will or forces to actually making it out of captivity and back to the family. So it's such an unfortunate situation with this type of abduction cases, where you have 16-year-old high school girls in a sudden being drug addicts forced into prostitution.
Yeah, Stefan, I work on a lot of these cases over here. I just had one young woman who had a mental illness on top of this whole situation, was being human trafficked. And any contact, people say, well, why don't you just go to the police? anytime she had any contact with the police, they arrested her. You know, and when she would get on psych meds in jail and they let her out, and then she'd be back there, you know, right into the hands of these pimps. They let her out without her medication. Another young woman here, Annika Mack, she was sold from one pimp to another, kept in a garage until she had gangrene. She lost a finger. She had gangrene in her legs and her fingers and her hands. And when she first escaped from there, they dumped her off at the ER. First contact with the police, she was going to be arrested. So, again... And I've met so many women, too, in the past few years, I can't tell you. It's definitely increasing. It's escalating. I've met so many women tell me, oh, I spent 2 years held captive by my ex-boyfriend or held captive by my ex-husband. And no consequences to these men who have done this. Sometimes not even a report made to the police. Only one out of these women I could think of actually made a report to the police and nothing came out of it. So you can imagine the unreported statistics of people being held beyond their will. And it has to be the most horrific experience. We only have one life. And to live your life in captivity, in imprisonment. Either, like you said, on death row or in a situation like this, being human trafficked. Let me ask you this, because I know I have a little PTSD from dealing with these kind of subjects. How has this affected you personally, exploring these kind of stories?
It goes right to my heart.
Yeah.
And it goes right to my mind. And the worst thing about, or I wouldn't say the worst thing, the times that I'm most affected by this are the times where I actually do the interviews and I sit and I write these stories. Because when you write a chapter, when you write one case story, it can take weeks and weeks and weeks. And you feel like you're living through the pain with these victims again constantly for weeks. At the end, when I'm done with writing about these cases, I think that I shield myself. I think that I actually try not to think about it. Because, you know, certain things, and I believe it, I guess it's the same thing if you're a private investigator or if you're working as a police officer or if you're working at an ER, you see things that if you don't shield yourself, you won't be able to do your job because it would be too hard to carry. So what I do with these things is actually, you know, I can't escape it when I'm writing the stories because they're in my mind 24/7. I don't sleep often. No, if I sleep, I wake up very often. I have bad dreams and so on. But still, I really have to write these stories because if I don't write the stories, if other reporters, if other authors, if other people, they don't write these stories, how are we actually going to put focus on, in my opinion, the most important topic of all, crimes committed against kids? We need to, you know, put ourselves aside and put focus on the victims. And one thing is dead sure. It might be difficult both for you and I doing at times the jobs that we do, but it is nothing compared to the victims living through it. So if they can actually live through it or have to live through it, what I have to go through when dealing with these things, that is nothing compared to that. But honestly, it can be hard at times. But there's also a thing that actually affected me deeply, and it's much more banal in certain ways. But you know, it's just so human that it touches me deeply, and that is the violence that I have seen within the white supremacy movement, which I'm currently also doing a documentary movie about. Seeing how neo-Nazis and seeing how members of the Ku Klux Klan that is still around, how violence is something that is a normal part of their life 24/7. When they commit violence, it's nothing compared to the crimes that we're talking about now committed against kids and also adults. But seeing that in some people's lives, violence is such a natural part of their life that they don't even need excuses to have it as a natural part of their life. That has also affected me deeply because you sit back and you think, if this can actually be something so acceptable to other people and their hate against other people just because of their religion, their sexual orientation or the color of their skin, if that hate can be so deep within them, then it is really difficult to find an explanation for it. It's also difficult finding an explanation, even harder for, kids being abducted. But at least you sit back and you can say, thank God, it is such, a small percentage of the human race that is sick, cruel, and crazy enough to commit such a crime against a child, to commit an abduction. And you find some relief and some explanation within that. I have found it really difficult to find explanation and live with the fact that so many people in this world, and we're talking millions of people, that are actually prepared to use violence in their everyday life, no matter if they're part of a racist organization or if they just go home to their wives and their kids and beat a certain thing out of them just because it's a part of the human being they are. Dealing with these cases and actually sitting in the living room with them, that also, affects me deeply. But on the other hand, it also gives me as a person value, because I started out by telling how I turned from being a reporter who wanted to do something good with my journalism to becoming a businessman focusing on creating for myself. A huge part of my career, though I'm only 44, I have done my work to create and gather for myself. Some people, they might think that, it really sounds like I'm creating a fuss around myself or putting myself on a pedestal. But I actually think that, writing about the stuff that I do today, it can do something good for other people. And despite going through these, phases with the work that I do, at the end of the day, it's worth it if it can help someone else. If writing this book will help one of the kids or the grown-ups still missing, if it can help this person come home because someone might read the book and know something about one of the cases, then it's worth it. And then I'll gladly do it till the day I won't be able to hit the keyboard on my computer any longer.
Stefan, I've really enjoyed our talk today, and when you do that documentary about the white supremacy, please come back. We got about just barely a minute. How can people get a hold of you if they want to contact you or follow you on Twitter?
I think the easiest way would go to be going to my website, www.steffenhou.com. They'll find all my contact info there, and just write me an email, give me a call. And they can also follow me on Facebook and on Twitter. My handle is my name full, Stefan Hou. And I'll always be happy and proud if people feel like reaching out.
Stefan, thank you so much. Good night.
Good night.
And now a word from our sponsors. EmailRevealer.com. People ask me all the time, hey Ed, are you still a private investigator? I sure am. Go to emailrevealer.com. We handle adoption investigations, infidelity investigations, where you give us your spouse's email address. We trace it back to online dating websites, catch them cheating online. Email tracing, locate or identify somebody from as little as an anonymous email address. Someone owe you money? Back child support? We can find that deadbeat, locate his hidden assets, locate his hidden bank accounts, find his current place of employment, and even assist you in obtaining a judgment and recover that judgment for you. EmailRevealer.com. Digital forensics, computer forensics, cell phone forensics, recover deleted text messages. Create a report that you can use in court. EmailRevealer.com, 800-572-9762. OppermanReport.com. Hey, do you like what you're hearing? Do you like the work that you see us doing here at Opperman Report? You can support that work by becoming a member at OppermanReport.com. And as you have access to over 200 exclusive shows and interviews that you can't find on YouTube or Spreaker or iHeart or iTunes or KYAH. You can't find them anywhere else online, exclusive to our member sections, to our members. Also, too, there's images, videos, documents, court docs, a lot of content there at OppermanReport.com. And it's the memberships that support the Opperman Report and allow us to play these shows for free on Friday nights and Saturday nights on all the stations you hear us on. You can also make a donation at OppermanReport.com. If you want to support the show and become a member, I can give you a discount. I'll give you 13 months for $65 if you email me directly at OppermanReport@gmail.com. And don't forget, you can hear your ad played here on the Opperman Report, reach hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people on a daily basis because the show is repeated every day all over the world. Contact me at OppermanReport@gmail.com and I'll give you a good deal on advertising rates. And now a word from our sponsors. Hey, check out our brand new sponsor, Dynamic Solutions 2. That's the number 2. They offer a life-changing, dynamic financial solution. The finest in fast, professional, affordable credit repair. Is your credit in bad shape? Do you need a new car? Ready to buy a new house? You want to rent an apartment? Are you going to apply for a job? Any one of these activities, they're going to ask for a credit report and then check out your credit score. Let Dynamic Solutions 2 erase your negative credit remarks. They have affordable monthly prices. They accept Visa, MasterCard, PayPal options available. You go to www.dynamicsolutions, that's the number 2.com, or call 424-888-2820. 424-888-2820. Now, if you enter promo code ED or you mention Ed Opperman, you get a 10% discount. How's that? You get a free consultation, all negative items removed, get back in positive credit position. Dynamic Solutions 2, life-changing dynamic financial solutions. 424-888-2820. Tell them Ed Opperman sent you. You get a 10% discount.
Tina Helmuth is writing an ongoing series of fact-fiction books that boldly takes on today's most heinous crimes: the abduction, sexual trafficking, and cannibalization of our children. Suffer the Little Children, The Wrath of the Father, and Unbreakable. Deeply researched and mixed with the supernatural, good versus evil makes these thrillers hard to put down, shining a light on the root cause of these crimes and introducing a spiritual solution. Justice will be served. Available at Lulu.com in paperback or ebook.
Are you ready to change your life, but don't know how to start? Is your stress and worries keeping you awake at night? Have you been battling grief, anxiety, or depression all alone? Have you lost touch with your own sense of being or spirituality? Soul Free Therapies offers professional and affordable live video streaming counseling and coaching services from the comfort of your own home. Sessions offered in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to our website at www.soul-free.com and book your first session today.
It's the Opperman Report, And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.